BAM is a communications agency that believes stories move the world. We move stories forward for technology-driven brands that challenge, change, and create entire industries. Today, we have Kip Knight on the Dear BAMf podcast. Kip is an operating partner at Thomvest Ventures. He is also the founder of CMO Coaches, a team of former coaches who work with aspiring marketing leaders. Kip has an extensive background in international marketing and management at companies such as P&G, PepsiCo, eBay, and H&R Block, and has worked with 64 countries around the world. He's also the co-author of the book, Crafting Persuasion, the Leader's Handbook to Change Minds and Influence Behavior. Let's dive in.
Welcome everyone to Dear BAMf, the podcast for marketing and comms pros. As usual, we've got a whole lineup of juicy, in-depth questions to answer. And today we're so honored to have the wonderful Kip on the show. Thank you, Kip, for being here.
Thanks, Beck.
We're excited. And I know you know the questions to come. So let's dive in. Here we go. First one. Dear BAMf, I have a client that has an incredible technology that helps prevent the spread of viruses and airborne particles. The company has been staying rather quiet as their technology is proven out in more and more scientific journals and studies. My issue is, this has now happened twice. The company's technology has been bought and touted as a defense to COVID-19. My client is shocked twice now. We've had to play a strong defense game with media to position the company as A, not affiliated with these other groups, and B, not claiming their tech is a defense to COVID-19. What else can I do to ensure another situation like this does not occur? We have a strong crisis plan in place. This is more about preventing such situations from occurring again. Kip, what say you?
Well, first of all, I sympathize with the person having to deal with a situation like this. I can imagine how frustrating it can be. I think my primary advice would be, to quote a former boss of mine, assume positive intent. And by that, I mean, assume that your guilty party was not deliberately going out and trying to hurt your reputation. They might have been under all kind of pressures from their own investors to try to make a big splash, get some press, get some notoriety. But I think one of the ways you can help prevent that is, as you talk to your new clients, just emphasize extremely heavily up front what the do's and don'ts of the relationship are. And if you have to, put a little bit of the fear of God in them in terms of legal liabilities and the fact that you're real clear on what your limitations are. But if they ignore those and claim things that aren't true, then that's on them. That's not on you. And I would certainly hope that if they took that type of pre-work, the odds of a future client trying to claim things that their technology is frankly not capable of doing, the odds of that go down fairly dramatically. And if it does, at that point, I might even get the lawyers involved and say, hey, look, you were warned, you've crossed the line, and if you're sued, it's on you. We had you sign. In fact, I would even have the lawyers have them sign something up front that just says, hey, look, we know what the do's and don'ts are, and if we violate those, then it's on us.
The other nice silver lining of this, in a way, is now you have two examples to point to with your future partners to say, hey, yeah, you're signing this agreement and the legalese and everything, but let me just give you an example of what's happened already before, which is why we have this really strict agreement. And you can see how it hasn't played out well for these other two partners. You don't want to be that, because I'm making an assumption here, but I'm assuming that in these cases, these partners haven't turned out to be in a good light in the media landscape. So again, to your fear of God thing, yeah, point to those, give them an example. Any potential partners should be aware of that too. I'm surprised, I'd be surprised if they didn't bring that up and say, what happened with these two other partners? Do you guys are you a protection against COVID-19? Should we tout that? No. So at least the silver lining here is that you've got that, and definitely bring the lawyers in for sure on this. This is a common thing too, by the way, we've seen with a handful of clients whenever there's a B2B to even B type of situation going, the technology is embedded. It's not what the consumer or the outward facing end user is seeing. Your technology, your product is in the background, but now it's associated by just that. And this is where that can get muddled. So very typical conversation or typical situation. Unfortunately for these folks, it sounds like the partners are jumping the gun a little bit to say, oh my gosh, it's a cure, or it's a protection, or it's a something. And you can educate from there.
Yeah, one final quick thought on this one. Steve Jobs defined brand as simply being trust, and your brand is only as good as your brand is trusted. So one other thing to point out to your potential partner is to say, if you violate the trust that we've got with each other, and you also violate the trust the public's got in you, then this marriage won't work. So let's just agree right up front that trust is the most valuable asset we have, and we will do anything we have to make sure that we guard that.
Mm-hmm. Next question. Dear BAMf, I'm an internal comms person at a well-funded biotech company. My two co-founders are truly brilliant, and the issue we're solving is massively important and yet quite complex. My concern is, when I ask one of the founders to tell me what we do, I get a 12-minute answer. Clearly, they are not media ready. When I've mentioned that reporters on interviews, podcasts, or on TV need quote-unquote sound bites, they both say, well, our tech is not a soundbite. How can I navigate this? Oh, I've seen many of these. What would you say, Kip?
Well, I have learned a rule a long time ago that says that any idea worth marketing can be written on the back of a business card. And you can write it in one sentence. And if you don't believe me, I thought about this a little bit. And let's pretend you'd never heard of some brands that we're very familiar with: Uber, Google, Amazon. So I had a little bit of fun with this. So on the back of a business card, I could write, Uber, a more convenient and affordable means of personal transport. Google, free access to the world's information. Amazon, shop for anything you want, and it's delivered to your doorstep. So that, I think, is the essence of the promise that these brands are making to their clients. And one thing that I've also believed, and one thing that I've tried to really be really good at, and I would urge everybody to try to do the same thing, it is really simple to make things complicated. It is really complicated to make things simple. Yeah, that'll be your Kip quote of the podcast.
Yes, Kip.
One of the things I've had people tell me that I'm good at is I can take things that are really complicated and try to simplify them so that people can understand it. And so my response to these, I'm sure incredibly intelligent founders would be, look, the vast majority of the world does not know what we do. In a competing world of a million ideas, we've got to make sure that we give them the headline. And if they're interested, we can bore them to tears. We can tell them all the wonderful details. But if you don't hook them with the back of the business card headline, then it's done. So I understand your concern that we're complicated, but our goal is to make it simple. And we've got to do that in PR, and we've got to make sure that we do that effectively and consistently with the people that we want to go reach.
I love that. Put it on a business card. I love that too, because with engineering science folks, they will love the constraints of that. Physically, it can only be done in this type of dimension. In addition, there's something I could definitely see the pushback or the further next question of, well, it's totally different if we're talking to CNBC or Time Magazine versus a very specific scientific journal, which indeed there is a difference. And the reporters more so at a trade publication or a scientific journal are going to be much more familiar with the vernacular and want to know the complex details, et cetera. So the next point to this is you got to know your audience. You got to know the audience. And perhaps what this person can do with these co-founders is when you set them up for these interviews, you tell them where that audience is. Okay, this is a national outlet with a wide-ranging audience. We need it to be the business card. It needs to be associated. It needs to be appropriate for our moms who are listening, who never knew what maybe you're doing, to understand. Versus, okay, this is a long-form journal that has a very deep science-backed reporter who's going to be asking you questions. We're going to get into the science and the nitty-gritty, so we can be a little bit longer. That's the audience because we're talking to scientists. So sometimes I've found that when you give those parameters, it helps then navigate the level of the conversation that you can then have and go in depth with. Just something to consider.
I totally agree with that. But the one watch out I would say is I don't care how sophisticated your audience is, if they're unfamiliar with what you're doing, if you can't summarize it in one simple headline before you get started, then you're not ready. Forget it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've met too many wannabe founders, and you basically say, okay, so what's your big idea? What's your pitch? And then 10 minutes later, it's like, oh my God, where's the door? They're all over the map. What's the big idea? Why do you want me to get excited? How are you different? How are you going to be unique and sustainably, competitive? So again, I would go back to my thesis of it doesn't matter I agree with you totally on tailor it to your audience, but the glue that sticks everything together is what's your headline, what's your big idea, and from there you can go into as much detail as you like.
Mm-hmm. Agree on that. And headlines are always short. All headlines. So there you go. Another constraint that you could offer. Next question here. Dear BAMf, I'm at a startup in the prop tech space with about 100 employees. We're not huge, but our traction is getting somewhere and the industry now knows us. This is just some context. Here's my issue. Previously, we've done little on the PR side on purpose. Now we're about to make some waves, and I'm overseeing the comms freelancer who will be helping us. Since we have had nearly zero media footprint, I want us to do podcasts. My CEO has dismissed these as, quote, a waste of time. What would you counter with?
Well, Beck, I don't know. And we talked about some of the work I've done with the State Department.
No, we have not. Do tell.
Yeah, so back in 2008, believe it or not, I got invited to go talk to the National Security Council at the White House, and they were concerned about America's image abroad, and we had a meeting across from the Oval Office, and the gist of that meeting was they said, what should we do? And my answer was simply, well, you've got all these hundreds of people out around the world, but unless they have some kind of a strategy that they're all working against and they're trained on executing against that strategy, then you're beat. And for the last 12 years, I've tried.
Can we just back up a second? So just so we're clear, you were called to the Oval Office with Obama in office to talk about the PR, the brand of America and an external landscape. Is that basically the gist here?
Correct, but it was Bush, not Obama.
Oh, okay.
It was toward the end there. But anyway, so my answer to your question is, it kind of goes back to your previous answer. It depends upon your strategy. It depends upon your audience. And the reason I bring up the State Department example is, I've worked with hundreds of diplomats, and I can't tell you how many times. And these are lower level diplomats that are working for like the ambassador. And the ambassador would go, I need a tweet, or I need a Facebook entry, or I need a podcast, or I need, whatever. And, historically, they've always kind of jumped and said, okay, fine, we'll do that. And our counsel was, strategy before execution. Take a time out. Make sure that you can all agree, okay, what is the objective? Who is the target audience?
Mm-hmm.
What is the primary message? Why should they believe it? What channels make the most sense to reach that audience? How do we want to measure the results? That's all part of a strategic approach. And if you simply say, well, the answer is podcast, my immediate response would be, well, I got a few questions first,
Yeah.
Are the people first of all, who are the people you're trying to reach, and do they even listen to podcasts? Or, with all due respect to this podcast, at last count, I think there were something like 1 million podcasts out there. So even if your target loves podcasts, do they listen to yours in particular? And do they frankly give a lot of credibility, et cetera, et cetera? So the answer may or may not be podcasts, but that's not the way to think about it. The way to think about it would be, what is your overall strategic intent? What are your primary questions that you've correctly answered? And then and only then do you get into the tactical considerations of which particular channel do you want to get into.
Yeah, this question is way down the funnel of, we don't have the context here of the why. I think what this person is trying to convey is, let me start off with something quote unquote easy. Podcasts, there's a gazillion of them, like maybe a couple people listen to a certain one, who cares? But that's actually, I would say, not the approach here. So I wouldn't I wouldn't come with this as podcast. That's the easiest thing. Like we'll just lay those up, just to get our footprint established. It's like, what's the bigger strategy here? And in fact, that could even be a dangerous thing, because there are some podcasts that have immense impact and incredible audience listenership that That's not actually true. And so you would definitely be able to educate on that. So this person, I think, needs to ratchet back to a few steps, like you're saying, and go, okay, what's the why? Is this where our audience lives? And is then that the best approach? And maybe another thing to consider is, well, what's on your own platforms? Could you be doing thought leadership there? Could you be posting on LinkedIn? Is there something on your social channels otherwise that would be best to establish? They're saying, oh, we have zero media footprint, but we don't know about maybe is the owned print foot? Is that substantial? Because that'll help, hopefully, if you have a pretty well-established footprint there, warrant media attention. If you got nothing on that area, that might be a big consideration to look at there.
One final comment on this one, and I'll put a plug in for the book I published last year with two of my co-authors, Bob.
The book I published, man, this White House book, everything.
I know. Well, anyway,
it's a big deal.
It's a great book. It's a great book, Crafting Persuasion, and one of the primary points the book makes is a lot of people get activity confused with results. And so another point I would make to the folks asking this question is, have you defined what success looks like? I mean, when they talk about, a zero media footprint, I would ask them, well, why do you care? Well, we want to have awareness. Okay, well, why do you want awareness? Well, we want users. Okay, why do you want users? Well, we need to make revenue. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. All right, so let's make sure we define exactly what it is you're trying to ultimately accomplish in terms of user behavior, because all of these other activities are frankly just leading up to that. And if you can't make a strong argument as to why whatever it is you're going to be doing in PR is going to ultimately ring the cash register or build your user base or increase your market share, then we're probably wasting our time.
Mm-hmm. Kip, are you writing another book? You got other stories coming out?
I do have another book coming out. We'll talk about that in another podcast, though. I'm not quite finished with
it. Okay. Well, we'll save that. Okay. Man, so much. All right. Well, here's our last question for today. Dear BAMf, when is too early to start on a crisis comms plan? I am now head of marketing and comms at a biotech company that's collecting consumers' information and saliva samples. We're still very early, and it will be another 12 plus months until the official product is on the market. I'm just getting concerned of anything happening with consumer information, getting hacked, etc. What do you typically advise?
All right. Well, Beck, you probably don't know this, but I'm an Eagle Scout. And you know what the motto of the Boy Scouts is, right?
Be prepared.
That is right. And so my answer to this question would be, do like the Boy Scouts, try to be prepared. And that covers a couple of different areas. First of all, in terms of the IT aspect of this, I would make sure that they have gone above and beyond what they need to do from an IT hacker perspective. What encryption, what, IT safeguards they've built in, just from a pure liability point of view, because, every day they're the headlines of, even the big companies have been hacked. So that's thought number one.
Mm-hmm.
And then thought number two, and this is more in your wheelhouse, you need to start doing a lot of scenario planning. By that, I mean, you need to start sitting down and asking a bunch of what if, what if the following happens? What would be our response? What would be our answer? And as you well know, the time, I'll put one more plug in for the book. One of the most popular sections of the book is, crisis management or issues management, because when it starts flying, that is not the time to start thinking about what you would do. I mean, you're in a pure execution mode at that point, and you've got to make sure that everybody has been prepared for this. You've got consistency of what people are telling folks. You've also making sure that the right people are talking to the press at the right time, because again, you've seen too many disasters of employees, answering random reporter questions, and all of a sudden you've got a full-fledged five-alarm fire as far as your company goes. So be prepared, both from an IT perspective and from a PR perspective, and you will sleep better at night. It doesn't mean it's never going to happen, but if it does, you'll at least know that you're ready to, give it your best shot.
We have had somewhat of this question before. Man, it is never too early. Just go with the Boy Scout model, like Kip said. Get prepared. Do it. You know what else too? The last thing, and I mentioned this before, is just there are so many examples to show of how when not prepared, it is not a good situation. You can just look at the countless articles and examples on the table for that. So it's easy to back this up to, I think, any CEO founder and say, oh, okay, so you don't think we should prepare? Well, let's look at this example of this company that was only this big, but got in hot water with a media cyclone, let's say, because we can deduce that there was no plan in place, that there was no professional help. And I can give countless examples to this. I will not go into it, but yeah, never too early.
Yeah. It makes her fun reading, but you certainly wouldn't want to be on the other side of that. That's for sure.
Exactly. Whenever I see those stories too, I'm like, oh gosh, some comms team right now is burning the midnight oil. You hope if there's a comms team involved, or otherwise there's definitely more hectic stuff going on. But there you go. Well, Kip, amazing stories. We have to do another podcast just on your adventures in the White House and Taco Bell and your books.
I'm game, Beck. You say the word. I'm ready.
I love it. Well, we'll have a second session, just night tales or something. Kip tales.
Believe it or not, Beck, that's the title of my next book, Night Tales. So
Night
you
Tales.
nailed it. Night Tales it. He's even got the URL, folks. So don't even think about getting it.
Oh, nice. Wait. Is it going to be nighttales.com?
Yeah, you got it.
Oh, okay. Well, everyone put that in their browser. When can we expect that?
Yeah, next year. I'd say 2021.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, great to talk with you, Kip, author, White House correspondent, ambassador, person, exec, all the things. My goodness.
Well, thank you, Beck. It's been fun and a real pleasure.
Thank you, Kip.
Okay, thanks.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to Dear BAMf, the advice podcast for PR and marketing pros like you. Our show is created by BAMf, a PR and marketing agency headquartered in San Diego and New York City. The music you're enjoying today was composed by Tiffany Dizon, produced by Daniel Kessler, and played by San Diego Symphony's Art of Alarm. Thank you to our podcast production team at Citizen Recording. If you have a tough PR and marketing question you'd like us to answer, please write to us at bamtheagency.com/Dear BAMf. Don't forget the F. We'll be back next Monday with another episode of Dear BAMf. Until then,